This conference finals player series props and game one player props edition of the Propcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. You can win up to times your entry with Underdog Fantasy Pick'em. Sign up with promo code NBA SGPN to claim your special pick and first time deposit bonus offer up to $250 in bonus cash. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Make sure you use that promo code NBA SGPN. We're also brought to you by the Mega Memorial Merch Sale. 15% off of everything SGPN merch store with promo code SGPN May. Welcome, everyone, to the Propcast, part of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. It is Tuesday, May the 21st, currently 1:07 on the East Coast. Here to get into the conference finals series player props. And also I'll get into game one of the player props that I like for game one on Tuesday night between the Indiana Pacers and the Boston Celtics. And typically, this is the first time actually I'm doing the conference final series player props, or at least a series long player props. Typically, we've done that more in a longer version for the NFL Propcast, where we do season long player props. But this is really my first time doing a conference final series props for the NBA, at least. Usually, you guys know how I do it here. It's usually game by game and doing it that way. But I thought there were some intriguing markets for us to look at, maybe some value that we can find within the conference finals for both the East and the West. And I'll just go in chronological order, starting with the East first and then the West in the latter part of the show here, because the Western Conference is to start till Wednesday night. And right now recording here on Tuesday, with the East starting on Tuesday night, game one between the Pacers and the Celtics. So, I told you guys that we were going to make the Propcast a bigger show, a bigger opportunity, and take it more to the next level. We do now have our very own Propcast YouTube channel. So if you haven't already, subscribe to the Propcast YouTube channel. I'm on the march to 1,000 subscribers there. If you guys want to do me a favor, I know if you're watching on either the NBA Gambling Podcast YouTube channel right now, if you want to get over to the Propcast YouTube channel, subscribe there as well. I think starting next week, I'll be exclusively going on the Propcast YouTube channel there. And you can tune in with me there for the Propcast. So, definitely go over to the Propcast and subscribe over there, because I'll be exclusively going to there on the YouTube channel after this week, and not on the NBA Gambling Podcast YouTube channel anymore, because we'll be doing more NFL content in the offseason here as well. And of course, until the NBA finals are over, we'll be doing NBA content and daily player prop bets as well throughout the postseason. So I'm definitely excited. And if you are in the comment section, if you are watching live, definitely want to interact with all my listeners there on the chat there. So if you have player props you guys like, you want to mention as well, go ahead and drop it in there, man. I can definitely discuss it with you guys as well, but also give along my player props game by game, and also for the series as well for both the East and the West. But before I get into the Eastern Conference series long player props, this is a great reminder. This week, it's a huge racing week, and if you are a fan of the F1 and NASCAR, you guys need to make sure you guys get over with my guys Rod and Cody, because not only do we have the Indy 500 this week, we also have the Monaco Grand Prix and the Coke 600. Rod and Cody from the NASCAR Gambling Podcast and the F1 Gambling Podcast have you covered. Make sure to join their Kyle Larson diecast car giveaway. That's free to enter. Just go to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/race to register, and make sure to subscribe to the NASCAR Gambling Podcast and the F1 Gambling Podcast as well. Plus, we're running a mega Memorial Day merch sale, 15% off of everything in the merch store. Promo code SGPN May. And again, I'll give a shout out to my guys again. They have a lot of great NASCAR Gambling Podcast stuff and F1 Gambling Podcast stuff store. So make sure you check it out. Use that promo code SGPN May. You'll get 15% off of everything on the merch store. That's store.sportsgamblingpodcast.com to get to the merch store. All right, let's get into it here for the Eastern Conference Finals. Again, like I mentioned, this is the first time I am doing this. So we'll kind of go, I guess, category by category and what I do like here as far as value and what some of the things that I will be betting on. So they have different markets, and this you can find on DraftKings, and that's what I'm referencing to right now, is that for the series for both the East and the West, they have total points leader, they have threes leader, rebounds leader, and assists leader, and then they also have points per game, assists per game, and rebounds per game. 3-pointers made as well, and they also have head-to-head points as well. Obviously, I'm not going to like everything in every single category. I kind of point out what I do like and what I will be betting on as far as some of these categories do go. And I think where we can really find some value in some of these markets here that the books have posted, in particular on DraftKings. So let's start here with the Eastern Conference Finals and the Celtics and the Pacers. So right now, for points leader, and this is total points, not points per game. So total points scored in the series right now, Jason Tatum is the overwhelming favorite at minus 500. Obviously, I don't like that. I'm not going to lay a minus 500 price. So I think we can find some other value here. So Jaylen Brown is second favorite. He's at plus 450. Pascal Siakam at 15 to 1. Hallie is at 20 to 1. Derek White's at 30 to 1. And then Miles Turner at 100 to 1. And I mentioned this when we did the preview for the Eastern Conference Finals and the Western Conference Finals, that I think there's going to be two different style of basketball being played in those respective series. What I do expect in the Celtics and the Pacers series, a lot of points to be scored, a lot of pace to be had in these games, because again, the Pacers, they play their brand of basketball in the playoffs, and dating back to the regular season, they were, I believe, the second fastest team as far as pace win, only behind the Washington Wizards. And they've translated that into the NBA playoffs here in the first and second round, and they play their brand of basketball, which has worked for them. And I know a lot of people can make the argument and want to say that, hey, they were fortunate with the injuries that Milwaukee Bucks had and also the New York Knicks had. But again, you play who's in front of you. You play against the players who are on the floor, and injuries are part of the game. And that's not only in the NBA, but also in the NFL as well, the MLB, the NHL. And that's just sometimes how it goes. But we go back to the regular season between these two teams, and they did match up 5 times, including the in-season tournament. I believe it was the semifinals for that in-season tournament where the Pacers did beat the Boston Celtics. Jason Tatum didn't play in one of the regular season games between these two teams, but him and Jaylen Brown were really good as far as scoring in this matchup against the Indiana Pacers. And I'll start here with Jaylen Brown, who was absolutely phenomenal in these 5 games this season against the Indiana Pacers. So in the 5 games, he averaged 28.4 points per game on 60.6% shooting, and wasn't very good from the 3-point line at 31.6%. But you take a look at the final 4 games during the regular season, Jaylen Brown scored 30, 31, 40, and 25 against the Indiana Pacers. He did have a 16-point game in the first game during the regular season. He only played 25 minutes in that game, and that was a game where the Boston Celtics absolutely blew the Pacers out of the water by scoring 155 points in that game. And obviously, when you're winning by 50 some odd points in that game, you're not going to play a whole heck of a lot of minutes. So he'll play 25 minutes. But at this point of the season in the playoffs, you do expect to be more competitive. I do expect the Pacers to keep this series competitive between the Celtics. And you also take a look at Jason Tatum against the Pacers as well. He was really good as well. And it was really led by their top 2 guys for the Boston Celtics in Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And I mentioned Jaylen Brown's number, where Jason Tatum in the 4 games that he played scored at least 30 points in all 4 of the games that he did play. He averaged 32.5 points per game, 11 rebounds in that series. He also shot 57.8% from the floor. He was 48.6% from beyond the arc. So I do think that one thing I will be looking out for in this series, and what I've noticed from Jason Tatum in this series and throughout the playoffs, has been that he's really fell in love with the 3-point shot, has Jason Tatum. And I really want to see both Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown attack the basket for the going up against the Indiana Pacers, because the Pacers really don't have that true big man, right? Like some of the other teams that are remaining in the playoffs. And you talk about teams like the Minnesota Timberwolves in the West. Well, obviously they have Rudy Gobert, they have Karl Anthony Towns. The Dallas Mavericks have Daniel Gafford that they acquired at the trade deadline. They also have Derek Lively that they drafted in the draft last year. Um, but it's the opposite story for, in fact, both of these teams of the Boston Celtics. Celtics really don't have that true rim protector. They have Al Horford, if you want to mention him. Porzingis, they should be getting back in games 3 or 4 in the series. He's been dealing with that calf injury. And if for more in particular, for the reason I'm mentioning this for the Pacers, is that they really have that rim protector. I know they have Miles Turner who can get you a couple blocks here and there, but he's not that traditional big man that's going to give you that rim protection. I know a guy like Jaylen Brown is going to be able to attack to the basket and get to the basket, where I just mentioned that Jason Tatum really he does fall in love with that 3-point shot. And I think where the points really can come from, and I want to get down on Jaylen Brown to be the points leader in this series for the Boston Celtics, and in fact, the entire series, is because he is the guy that attacks the basket. He is the guy that gets to the free throw line. He's the guy that can finish around the basket, where I feel like he won't fall in love with a 3-point shot. So I think there is some value here on Jaylen Brown to be that points leader, total points leader in this series. For the other side, for the Indiana Pacers, Haliburton has been a little bit inconsistent. He did find a little bit of his way in that New York Knicks series where he was locking down the 3-point shot in the latter part of the series. But I think Siakam is that one guy that can, again, is the guy that can, knock down that mid-range jump shot. He can knock down a couple 3-pointers for you as well. But he's more of a guy that can finish around the basket. And I think that's something that if you want to look at, if you like Pascal Siakam for the Pacers side, to put up points in this series and maybe, be the total points leader in this series. But Pascal Siakam got off to a great start in round 1 against the Milwaukee Bucks. And you take a look at that first 2 games, he had 36 points and 37 points. And after that, in that series, he really just tailed off, didn't score more than 20 points for the final 4 games of that series. In that series against the New York Knicks, he did have 4 games where he did score 20 plus points for the Indiana Pacers. But I think that more so for this series in particular, I really do like Jaylen Brown to be that guy. Again, like I mentioned, he's a guy that will attack the basket. And I just feel like that Jason Tatum will be a guy that just falls in love with a 3-point shot. So at least for this market, total points scored, Jaylen Brown at plus 450, I do like. And if you want to sprinkle a little bit as well on Pascal Siakam at 15-1, I wouldn't be able to talk you off of that. Moving over to 3-point leader in this series, Haliburton is right now the favorite at 120, followed by Derek White at plus 175, Jason Tatum at 6-1, Miles Turner at 20-1, Jaylen Brown 40-1, Aaron Nesmith 50-1, Andrew Nembhard 75-1, Al Horford 100-1, Sam Hauser 100-1, Peyton Pritchard 100-1, and Drew Holiday 100-1. I don't like Hallie at that price of 120, just because, again, he's been a guy that's been more hot and cold throughout the playoffs. But we definitely know he can knock it down, right? He did make an average of 4 against the New York Knicks on 9.4 attempts. He shot 43% from beyond the arc in round 2. But I think it is, again, going to be a guy for the Boston Celtics side. And this is a team we know that loves the 3-point shot. We saw it during the regular season. We saw it in round 2 against the Cleveland Cavaliers. We saw it in round 1 against the Miami Heat. And the one guy I do like that I know is going to get the attention because the defense will be focused on Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. And I've said this a lot of times, the guy that's not talked about enough for the success that the Boston Celtics have had has been Derek White. And I think Derek White also has been a little bit inconsistent, but going up against his Indiana Pacers team, who hasn't been very good defensively, I think this is going to be the series where they do get exposed by this Boston Celtics defense, this offense, because you take a look at the 2 teams that they did play in the first 2 rounds, right? If Giannis was there for the Milwaukee Bucks, obviously I do think that the Milwaukee Bucks would have beaten the Indiana Pacers in round 1. In round 2, we saw Dante DiVincenzo had, some really good games as far as shooting from beyond the arc, in particular because of the injuries that they did have. Dante DiVincenzo knocked down an average of 4 3-pointers on 9.2 attempts, something similar to what Tyrese Haliburton did. And a lot of those did come in game 7 because he was not a 15 from the floor. But I think Derek White is going to be that guy because I know he's going to get those open looks, and he's a guy that I do trust to consistently knock those shots down. He's done that throughout not only the regular season, but also in the playoffs for the Boston Celtics. So looking at it during the regular season, he was, let's see here, 2 of 9, 1 of 2, 2 of 8, of 4 of 7 from beyond the arc. I'm expecting Derek White to get those opportunities in this series. Like I mentioned, he's averaged 8.2 attempts in round 1 or in round 2 against the Cleveland Cavaliers. He also was getting about close to 9 attempts against the Miami Heat in round 1 as well. And in round 1, he knocked down 4.2 per game on average in those 5 games, where he had a total of, let's see here, 13, 17, 21 makes he had in the 5 games against Miami. And then he did cool off a little bit against the Cavs, but I do think, again, Derek White at plus 175, I do like for threes leader. Rebounding leader, I thought this was a little bit more wide open. Jason Tatum, I do believe a lot of success rebounding the basketball, but I don't want to lay that, again, the minus 500 price, because you take a look at what Jason Tatum did during the regular season against this Indiana Pacers team. He had at least 12 rebounds in 3 of the 4 matchups that he did play in this season. And quickly just looking at it, 12 rebounds, 13 rebounds, and in the last game had 7 rebounds. Al Horford, I don't expect him to play a whole heck of a lot of minutes, especially with them getting Porzingis back, probably for games 3 or 4. But I do know, like, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are going to be out there for 40-plus minutes a night, barring a out. I do expect those guys. And again, Jason Tatum has done a really good job of rebounding the basketball. So if you don't want to lay that minus 500 price for him to be the rebound leader, if you do think that he averages double-digit rebounds, right now DraftKings does have Jason Tatum at 9.9 rebounds per game on the over. So if you want to look at it that way, I couldn't talk you off of that for Jason Tatum. So those were the ones that I was looking at. Assist leader, Tyrese Halliburton's at minus 750. Again, the way that they do play, the number of minutes, I do expect him to be out there. I couldn't talk you off of that. I think a lot of people have put it out McConnell at the price of, I think he's at plus 750 to be the assist leader. I'm sorry, 30-1 is the number for TJ McConnell. The only thing that does make me nervous about McConnell is that he's not going to get the minutes because he only averaged 20 minutes per game coming off of the bench also for the Indiana Pacers to be the assist leader. So 30-1, maybe be a good number, but I do just expect Hallie to be that guy getting up the assist and racking up the assist, I should say, for the Indiana Pacers. So I will be on Jaylen Brown, just to recap, plus 450 to be the total points leader. I also do like Derek White at plus 175 for total 3-pointers made in this series as well. Rebounds, I do expect it to be Jason Tatum, but I'm not, again, laying that minus 500, but I will be betting the over 9.9 rebounds per game in this series for Jason Tatum. And yeah, that's pretty much it here for the series long props here for the Eastern Conference Finals. Before I get into game 1 player props here for the Tuesday night game for game 1, let me tell everyone about our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Hey, look, we're on to the conference finals here in the NBA playoffs, and our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy, wants to make it a whole lot more interesting. Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy sports. Playing their pick and game is as simple as selecting higher or lower on player stats like points, rebounds, assists, and so much more. Make entries of all basketball or mix and match across your other favorite sports. You can win up to 100 times your money, and it's a ton of fun. Underdog is available in 30-plus states, including California, Texas, and even Canada. Underdog will be running a ton of different promos, bonus cash airdrop specials, giveaways, and more throughout the NBA playoffs. So make sure to follow @UnderdogPicks on Twitter to keep an eye out. Underdog is available in 30-plus states, including California, Texas, and Canada. And they just launched Champions, their player versus player format in Florida. So sign up with promo code NBA SGPN to claim your special pick plus first-time deposit bonus offer up to $250 in bonus cash. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Make sure you guys use that promo code NBA SGPN. All right, let's keep it moving here for this game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals. And let me get this banner out of the way here. Game 1 tips off on Tuesday night. Taking a little water break there. Between the Pacers and the Celtics here. So let's get into it in game 1 here. I do like the Celtics in this game to score points and have a lot of success. The Pacers are in a tricky spot here, right? They're coming off of game 7 on Sunday. They only have one day off in between getting ready for game 1 against the Boston Celtics. Is also on the road for them. And that's typically been a tricky spot for teams coming off that game 7 and having that quick turnaround. So I do expect points to be scored in this game for the Boston Celtics. I do like their team total to go over the number of 116. But from a player prop perspective, if I'd like Jaylen Brown to be that guy to score points and have the most points in the series, I got to look at his points prop right now. And that number is set at 24.5. I do think it's a tad bit low for Jaylen Brown in this series. I'm sorry, in game 1 here. I read off the numbers for Jaylen Brown during the regular season. He played in all 5 matchups against the Indiana Pacers. He had 16 points in that first game during the regular season. Again, like I mentioned, that was an absolute blowout victory for the Boston Celtics, winning that game by 50-plus points and scoring 155 points in that game. But after that, he scored at least 25 points in 3 of the 4 final matchups during the regular season, including 3 games where he had 30-plus points for the Boston Celtics. And like I mentioned, he was very, very efficient from the floor, scoring points for the Boston Celtics. And in those 4 games, the final 4 games of the regular season, I'm going to quickly read off what he did from the field. 60.9%, 65%, 65.4%, and 60% from the floor. He averaged 12 makes per game on close to 20 attempts, and he didn't shoot a whole hell of a lot of threes, which tells me Jaylen Brown was attacking the basket against his Indiana Pacers team. And I do expect him to do that throughout the series and get those easy conversions around the basket or in the mid-range. And again, he's also a guy that can get to the free throw line as well. So Jaylen Brown over 24.5 points in game 1 is one player prop, number 1, that I do like. Series in game 1. So Jaylen Brown over 24.5 points. And also Jason Tatum rebounds. It is at 10.5 at plus 114. If you're able to find a 9.5, even better. But again, like I mentioned, he did have a lot of success rebounding the basketball against the Indiana Pacers, where he, in 3 of the 4 games that he did play, had at least 12 rebounds, 13 rebounds, and 13 rebounds, and 7 rebounds in the last game. And like I mentioned, if the Pacers are going to play at their pace throughout this series, there's going to be obviously a lot more shots being put up, which means what? More rebounding opportunities. Obviously, if there's going to be a lot more shot attempts. So Jason Tatum right now, over 10.5 at plus 114. I do like that for this game. For the other side, for the Indiana Pacers, I think this is a good opportunity for Pascal Siakam to really show and score the basketball for the Indiana Pacers. His number is right now is at 20.5 over on DraftKings. It is at minus 110. I mentioned that he got off to a great start against the Milwaukee Bucks in game 2, where he had 37 and 36 respectively in games 1 and game 2. And then if we fast forward against the New York Knicks in the conference semifinals, 4 out of the 7 games, he did score 20 or more points. He had 20 points in the final game 7, but then he had a game of 25, 22, and 26 against the New York Knicks. So he's averaging 21.1 points per game during the playoffs here. But again, I think that for Pascal Siakam, he's going to have to be that guy to really score points here for this Indiana Pacers team. So I do like his over 20.5. And also looking at some of these role players for the Indiana Pacers as well, right? It's going to be interesting to see which guy does show up. I know TJ McConnell has been a fan favorite, whether it's been on his points or his assists for the Indiana Pacers. But a guy like Aaron Neesmith is a guy that we talked about when we did the preview on the NBA pod for the Eastern Conference Finals. In particular, his 3-point prop, because he did have success against the Boston Celtics during the regular season, shooting the three ball. His number right now is set at 1.5 threes made at plus 105 on the over. I think that is some good value there for him to knock down the 2 3-point shots in this game one here for the Indiana Pacers. You take a look at what he was able to do during the regular season against this Celtics team. And in the 2 games where he did get significant minutes, in the final 2 games, I should say, he got up the attempts. Back on January 6th, got up 7 attempts. Unfortunately, didn't make any, but the attempts were there for him. But then in the final 2 games of the regular season, 3 of 5 from the beyond the arc, and also 4 of 7 from beyond the arc. So we're just asking him to get 2 here in game 1. I think he's fully capable of doing that. And I know that he's going to get the minutes as well for this Indiana Pacers team, because he's averaging 30 minutes per game the last 5 games in the playoffs. So I know that at least he's going to be out there 30 minutes. He played 35 minutes per game against the Milwaukee Bucks in round 1, and then around 31 minutes in round 2 against the New York Knicks. And majority of his shots, or I should say at least 50% of his attempts from the floor, are coming from beyond the arc. And I think he just has to be a little bit more consistent in knocking them down. He did have 3 games against the Knicks where he did knock down at least 2 3-pointers. And then against the Milwaukee Bucks, he had 3 games of the 6 where he knocked down at least 3 pointers. So just asking him to get 2 here. I know the attempts will be there for Aaron Neesmith, and also the attempts will be there for him as well. So at plus 105, couldn't talk you off of that for Aaron Neesmith. My guy OG, Wham checking in. What's going on, Wham? Appreciate you tapping in, man. He likes Andrew Nembhard at over 12.5 average for the postseason. Yeah, I think that Andrew Nembhard is another guy that is going to get the minutes for the Indiana Pacers, especially when TJ McConnell, when Tyrese Halliburton checks out of the game. He's averaging 13 right now for the postseason, and he's another guy that is getting minutes right now. He's averaging 30.3 minutes per game. And the thing about Andrew Nembhard, I should say, he's been efficient, man. He's shooting 53.3% from the floor. And I think that's something that really is great to see for a guy like Andrew Nembhard. Over the last 5 games as well, he's shooting it very well from beyond the arc. Last 5 games in the postseason, obviously, which all were against the Knicks, he shot 57.1% from the floor. He's not getting up a lot of attempts. He's averaging close to 3 attempts, but he's making the most of the opportunities where he's averaging around 1.5 make per game. So again, he had 2 games in there where he had 2 threes made and 3 threes made, but he's also a guy that I've noticed that attacks the basket and also can get to the free throw line as well for this team. So he's going to be an integral part of that. Again, if the Pacers want to make this a series and give the Celtics a run for their money, or who knows, even possibly upset them, Andrew Nembhard is going to have to be that guy next to Tyrese Halliburton and Pascal Siakam to provide that scoring support. So, Wham, I couldn't talk you off of that for him to be over at 12.4 points per game in this postseason. So I think that's a good look as well for Andrew Nembhard. All right, before I get over to the Western Conference Finals, let me tell everyone about the newest sponsor here on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, and that's going to be Rhythm. If you're betting on the NBA player props like I am, then you need to download Rhythm. Rhythm gives you a menu of the best player props for every single NBA playoff game, making it easy to go through to find the best props to put your money on in seconds. Rhythm's predictions are backed by over 3 years of data and a team of data scientists and quants that focus on fine-tuning our algorithm to give you the best shot at winning. Rhythm pairs its predictions with player prop graphs to help feel even more confident in your picks, which you can make whether you normally place your bets or on your DFS games for those daily fantasy sports players. From superstars to bench players, Rhythm finds the best player props lines, and all backed by AI data without you needing to endlessly scroll through the sportsbook. Rhythm also allows you to create your own custom NBA model so you can get AI-backed money line, spread, and total picks for every playoff game. Start a free 7 trial and start winning your NBA player props with Rhythm. Available wherever you do get your apps. So again, check out Rhythm wherever you do get your apps, whether that's in the Google Play Store or in the App Store. Again, make sure you guys check out Rhythm. All right, let's get over to the Western Conference for the series prop bets. I'll be honest, I did like a lot more here for the Eastern Conference because I feel like the series between the Mavericks, it's going to be, I think, a rock fight. And that doesn't mean that we won't be able to find a lot of value for the Western Conference, but there was some more that I did like in the East and in the West. But right now, for points leader for the Western Conference, it's a little bit more closer because, like I mentioned, Jason Tatum was minus 500 for the East. But obviously, when you have two players on respective teams that can, absolutely put the ball inside the basket with Luka Doncic and Anthony Edwards. So Luka is favored right now, currently over on DraftKings at minus 140. Edwards is there, followed at plus 130. Kyrie Irving 15-1, Karl Anthony Towns 20-1, and it goes on from there. So I think it's going to be at minimum these top four guys, but it more than likely will be led by Luka. And then when we did the Western Conference Finals preview, we talked about that the perimeter defense matchup between the backcourt of the Mavericks and the Timberwolves defense is going to be so fun to watch. And if you're a junkie like the NBA and really pay attention to those X's and O's matchups, this is going to be really, really fun to watch. Dating back to the regular season, let me start there. Luka did have a lot of success against his Timberwolves perimeter defense. And I know we're missing guys like Cat and Jaden McDaniels. But at least in the two games that Luka did play in the postseason, during the regular season against the Wolves, was where he did play 39 minutes in each of those two games, and he scored 39 points and 34 points against the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I'll quickly go look inside the box score and see if Jaden McDaniels did play in those games. So that first game, yes, Jaden McDaniels did play. So did Anthony Edwards. And in the second game where Luka scored 34 points, Jaden McDaniels also did play in that game. So I think for Luka to be the point scorer at minus 140, I feel like I hate going with chalk, but I'm not sure the consistency I'm going to get from Kyrie Irving, because Kyrie in round one was absolutely fantastic against the Clippers. And in round two, he did cool off a little bit. He really didn't show up till the second part of the series, whether that was more in particular in game 6 for the Dallas Mavericks. And I mentioned this when we did preview the Western Conference Finals, that I think whoever has a better series between Kyrie Irving and Karl Anthony Towns just be the difference on which team advances to the NBA Finals. Because we can also make the same case that Karl Anthony Towns had a great games 1 and game 2 against Denver Nuggets, tailed off a little bit, and then showed up in game 7 for the Minnesota Timberwolves. But I really want him to be a little bit more consistent for this Minnesota Timberwolves. And same thing with Kyrie Irving. Anthony Edwards, I love watching him play, but there are going to be a couple games in this series where he's just not going to shoot the ball very efficiently. And we saw that in not only round 1, I know they only played in 4 games, where he had that one game where he's from the floor 15 points, but it was more in particular against the series against the Denver Nuggets, where he had 2 games in there, or 3 games in there, where he scored less than 20 points. Game 7, 6 of 24 from the floor. He only had 16 points. Game 5, 44 minutes. He only scored 18 points. And then in game 3, he only scored 19 points. Where Luka, yes, I know he's dealing with the lower leg injury, whether it's his knee or his ankle. But I know shot volume is going to be there for Luka. And I think Luka gets a little bit more of a friendly whistle because of the amount of times he does complain to the referees. And I think that's where I think Luka maybe found his form in the final 2 games against OKC, because he was a whole hell of a lot more efficient in those games 5 and 6, because he shot 54% from the floor and 60% from the floor. And also from beyond the arc, he was a bit more efficient, shooting at 45% and 66% in games 5 and 6, combined 9 of 17 from beyond the arc in those games. So Luka at minus 140, I think it makes a lot of sense for him to be favored there. The one I will focus on, and I'm going to jump around a little bit here, Luka, another guy for him to average over 8.5 rebounds per game in this series as well. He was in double-digit rebounds in, I want to say, all 6 games against the OKC Thunder. Sorry, he didn't. So the first game of the series, he only had 6 rebounds, where he played 41 minutes, but the rest of the way, he was in double-digit rebounds in the final 5 games, where he averaged 10.5 rebounds. Obviously, that was to his advantage because the Minnesota Timberwolves have Rudy Gobert. They also have Karl-Anthony Towns, and they also have other guys that can rebound the basketball as well. But I think the opportunities for Luka to come in and get those rebounds will be, because I don't trust Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively to be on the floor consistently, because those are 2 guys that are prone to get into foul trouble. And I think that Luka, we know, is a guy that can walk into any gym in any arena and put up a triple-double. And he put up a triple-double in the final 3 games of the series against the Oklahoma City Thunder. And he also, like I mentioned, had 15 rebounds in game 3 against the OKC Thunder. So I thought 8.5 was a little bit conservative for Luka. And again, I know he's going to be playing a lot more minutes in the postseason where those opportunities are going to be there. And like I mentioned, this is a series I feel like it's going to be complete opposite of what we saw between or what we are going to see between the Celtics and the Pacers, where a lot more pace, a lot more points being put up, where it's going to be a rock fight between these 2 teams. And if we're going to see a lot of, again, that provides opportunities for rebounds to be there for guys like Luka, and in fact, a lot of the other players here as well. So I do like to average over 8.5 rebounds in this series against the Minnesota Timberwolves. Don't be surprised if he's in the neighborhood of averaging 10 again, like he did against the OKC Thunder, because again, we know Luka can get those rebounds for the Dallas Mavericks. 3-point leader, Luka is at plus 120. I don't like that. He's just a little bit inconsistent for me. The question becomes for the Dallas Mavericks, is PJ Washington be able to replicate what he did against the OKC Thunder? Because the perimeter defense for the Minnesota Timberwolves is going to be fully focused on slowing down Luka and Kyrie Irving. And does that open up an opportunity for a guy like PJ Washington? Because I know the attempts are going to be PJ Washington, because if we take a look at what he did against the OKC Thunder in that series, he averaged 8.2 attempts per game, and he was able to knock down 3.8 attempts per game as well. So close to around an average of 4 for PJ Washington. He shot at 46.9%, about 47% from the floor. So it's going to be interesting to see, are those opportunities and those shot attempts again going to be there for PJ Washington, because there were 3 games in that series against the OKC Thunder where he had double-digit attempts from beyond the arc. Games 2, 3, and 4, he had at least 11 attempts, and he was able to knock down at least 5 3-pointers. And I think when you go back and look at it right now in hindsight, that may have just been the difference for the Dallas Mavericks to win not only those games in games 2 and 3, but also winning the series because of the way PJ Washington shot from the floor here. So I'll be curious to see if those attempts are there for him again for PJ Washington. He's at 6-1. Karl-Anthony Towns is also intriguing at 10-1 as well because he proclaims himself to be the best big man 3-point shooter, I guess ever, or in a generation as well. The concern for me about Karl-Anthony Towns is the volume going to be there for him, and also the shooting percentage during the regular season. The 4 matchups that he did play against the Mavericks, he did average 21 points per game, and also shot 41.7% from beyond the arc. But at 10-1, I think there's an opportunity there for him. But I think I do like PJ Washington at 6-1. I think that he's going to be very, very important for this team to knock down those 3-point shots for this team. So those are the ones I was coming looking at. Rebounding leader, Rudy Gobert's minus 1,400, and that makes a lot of sense. He had a lot of success rebounding against the Dallas Mavericks. In fact, throughout his career, not only just when he was with Minnesota, but also when he was with Utah, he did have a lot of success. So at minus 1,400, that's not something that I think anybody would be interested in. He's the average right now is set at 12.5 rebounds per game in this conference finals for Rudy Gobert. I talked about this on the NBA pod today, is that Rudy Gobert, is there a possibility that he gets played off the floor in this series? Will Luka and Kyrie Irving pick and roll him to death in this series? I think there is a possibility there, but I think that 12.5 is a little bit inflated for Rudy Gobert. So I do like the under 12.5. Against Phoenix, he averaged 11 rebounds. A game in there against the Phoenix Suns, or sorry, against the Denver Nuggets, I should say, with the birth of his child. But also against the Denver Nuggets, he had a rough time against Nikola Jokic, where he only averaged also 10.8 rebounds in that series. I think this number may be a little bit for Rudy Gobert on his rebounds at 12.5. So I do like the under 12.5 rebounds average for Rudy Gobert. Points per game for the Western Conference Finals, I think some of these numbers are pretty spot on. I don't see a number posted for Anthony Edwards right now, currently over on DraftKings. Karl-Anthony Towns, I think it's at the right number at 20.1. Kyrie's at 20.8. Luka, 28.3. PJ Washington, 12.6. So nothing really excited me there. Which leads me to get to the game 1 player props on Wednesday night for game 1 between these two teams. And I'll start with a points prop I do like, and that is actually going to be Kyrie Irving. This number opened up at 20.5 in favor to the over at minus 135. That number now has moved consensus to 21.5 for Kyrie Irving. And as I mentioned when we were talking about the series, that the difference, I think, in this series on which team advances on who the better player and provide that scoring support to their other superstar between Anthony Towns and Kyrie Irving. I know Kyrie Irving is fully capable of doing it, and so is Karl-Anthony Towns. I do like Kyrie Irving to show up in this series. And again, if Jaden McDaniels is matched up and there is an emphasis to slow down Luka, Kyrie Irving, with the way that he plays the game and the way he's able to utilize the way he can create separation with this crafty, the way that he dribbles the basketball is absolutely so fun to watch. I think he's had some of the best handles in NBA history. And I don't think that's a hot take, because guys that come to mind, Isaiah Thomas, Kyrie Irving, you can probably throw Steph Curry into that conversation as well. Jason Williams of the Sacramento Kings. I know he was more of a quote unquote and one type of guy, but he had a lot of great handles, and his passing ability was absolutely phenomenal. But I think Kyrie Irving is a guy that if he does get mismatches on guys like Rudy Gobert or Karl-Anthony Towns, he can really get past them. So I'll be looking out for Kyrie Irving in game 1 to come out and really set the tone and have a great game 1. So I do like him over 21.5 for Kyrie Irving in game 1. Derrick Jones Jr. is another guy that I am interested in, because he was absolutely phenomenal in game 6 for the Dallas Mavericks. And that was more so because PJ Washington did get into foul trouble, but he is averaging 10.8 points per game in this playoffs. And if we go back to the game, the final 3 games in that series against the OKC Thunder, Derrick Jones Jr., 17 points, 19 points, and 22 points. And he was very efficient from a 3-point line as well. He shot 37.5% in that series against the OKC Thunder, at least over the last 5 games. And against Minnesota, in the 3 games that they did match up, he averaged 10 points. But I think the one thing that really does stick out for Derrick Jones Jr. is he averaged 7.7 rebounds per game against the Minnesota Timberwolves this season alone. And as I pull up his game log here against the Minnesota Timberwolves, he had a game in there where he had 4 rebounds, 9 rebounds, and 10 rebounds. And those were all in 30-plus minutes. And I know that Derrick Jones Jr. is going to get the minutes played because he is averaging 32.1 minutes per game for the Dallas Mavericks. So if you want to pair his points with his rebounds, couldn't talk you off. His rebounds right now for game 1 is set at 3.5 at plus 120. I kind of like that for Derrick Jones Jr. For him to get 4 rebounds in this game with the number of minutes that he will be playing, we know he's a guy that can get those offensive rebounds and off those misses, get the offensive rebounds and dunk it back. But he's also a guy we know he can jump out of his shoes. He has hops. If you watch Derrick Jones Jr. play throughout his career, he can jump. So at plus odds at 3.5 on for his rebounds at plus 120, I really do like that for Derrick Jones Jr. I typically take the first game of the series and, really take a look at what the rotations are looking at, what some of these defensive matches that we're looking at. And then in game 2, and as the series progresses, then really go up on volume as far as player props here. So just to recap for game 1 for the Dallas Mavericks and the Minnesota Timberwolves, Kyrie Irving over 21.5 points. Derrick Jones Jr., if you want to tack on points and rebounds for him, that's a worth look. But I do also like that over 3.5 on his rebounds at plus 120 for Derrick Jones Jr. Naz Reid is another guy we should mention for the Minnesota Timberwolves coming off the bench. We know good for at least 20 to 25 minutes. He can knock down that 3-point shot. He could get to the basket as well. His points prop right now is set at 9.5 in this game. That's not asking a whole hell of a lot for Naz Reid. He's also his 3-point prop is at 1.5 at plus 120. So I know he's going to get the looks for the Minnesota Timberwolves. It's about him knocking him down. So I think that those are the 2 opportunities I'll be looking at for Naz Reid. If we're going to take his points over 9.5 or his 3-pointers made at 1.5 at plus 120. So there you go. We'll wrap it up a little more here as the conference finals progress. Like I mentioned, for the first games of these series, I really like just watching what the rotations look like, what the number of minutes will be allocated, and kind of the offensive game plan for a lot of these teams. And then that gives us a little bit more data as well as the series progress as well. So went through both conference series long player props, game 1 player props as well. And like I mentioned, we'll ramp it up as we go along. As far as the best bet goes for this game 1, I'm going to go with Jaylen Brown over 24.5 points in game 1 on Tuesday night. And like I mentioned, he's been very, very efficient against the Indiana Pacers, not only during the regular season, but he's also a guy that I do trust that will attack the basket and get the easy buckets and not fall in love with a 3-point shot. Yes, Jaylen Brown can knock it down, but I'm more confident that he's going to attack the basket and get those easy looks and rack up the points that way. Where Jason Tatum, like I mentioned, I feel like he's just falling in love with the 3-point shot a little bit more, where I would like to see him attack the basket a little bit more and get those easy, finishes around the basket. But I do trust Jaylen Brown. And like I mentioned, Jaylen Brown has been absolutely incredible against the Indiana Pacers. And I read off the numbers. If you didn't hear, I'm not going to regurgitate everything here on the best bet portion, but Jaylen Brown has been really good against the Indiana Pacers. So I do expect him and Jason Tatum to come out and set the tone here for the Boston Celtics in game 1, but more in particular for Jaylen Brown. So best bet for the show, game 1, Jaylen Brown over 24.5 points in game 1 against the Indiana Pacers. Hopefully I can break the losing streak that I've had as far as the best bets have goes. I know those haven't gone very well, but hopefully Jaylen Brown does get me to the window here for game 1. All right, that is going to wrap it up here for this edition of the Propcast. Again, Propcast now has its own YouTube channel. So please do me a favor, go ahead, go to the Propcast for the Sports Gambling Podcast Network YouTube channel. Do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and we'll be exclusively going on the Propcast channel starting next week, whether that's going to be for the NBA or whether that's going to be for the NFL as well. We're going to start getting into some NFL content, like I mentioned at the top of the show. So appreciate everybody that has tuned in. Leave me a like and review, whether you do this on Spotify, whether it's on Apple Pod, whether you do wherever you do get your pods. Really do appreciate some reviews coming in for the Propcast. If you guys do enjoy it, share it with your friends, family, other bettors that you do know as far as player prop goes, because it is a really fun market to talk about for any sport, but more in particular for the NBA and the NFL for me as well. So we'll be back for game 2. We'll kind of keep the same schedule, do a episode for game 2 for both games for each conference, and then we'll take it from game 3, game 4, and then once we do get into the NBA finals, we'll look at NBA finals props as well, and then like I mentioned, NFL content coming as well. We'll start looking at some of the awards markets for the NFL. So appreciate everybody that did tap in with me. I'll talk to you guys later this week. Till then, good luck with your bets. Let's break these books off and let it ride.